My father taught me how to play chess, but I learned an incredibly valuable lesson from what he taught me. Those hours that we would spend in our home library playing games of chess, I probably really should have learned things like strategy and focus and concentration, but that wasn't what I learned from my father. See, when I was 13 years old, he took me to see a match tournament by the chess player named Carlos Repeto. He was a rising star. I went into the Spanish colonial high-ceiling building with leaded glass windows and the light filtering in through the moats and the smell of dust and furniture wax. And there was a circle of 32 chessboards with Don Carlos, as they called him, in the middle. When he was 21 years old, he played the Russian chess master, the champion of the world, Lasky, in a game where he sacrificed his queen, lost 2 pawns, and still won the game. It was a move that was later called the windmill. The windmill because after he sacrificed his queen, the slow-moving blade of the windmill ground his opponent into dust. But a few years after that, Don Carlos was playing in Chicago for the championship of all of the Americas. In the final game, he lost the championship. Dejected, he walked out into the streets of Chicago. A group of thugs accosted him and beat him and put him in the hospital. The next morning, a friend trying to cheer him up brought him some mail, and he opened a letter from his fiancée, only to discover that she was breaking off their engagement and was going to marry someone else. That blow sent Don Carlos into a tailspin, an emotional slide that he never recovered from. He was in his 60s when I saw them, and occasionally he could get lured out to play these tournaments where numbers of chess players would come and play him. And here were 32 of Mexico's top chess players playing him, and he would go around from board to board making a move. With a gleam in his eye and a little smile on his lip, he would lock eyes with his opponent and kind of wink, giving him an indication of an incredibly good move. He won 28 of those 32 games. Now, when I was older, I started collecting chess pieces. I collected chess sets, but my favorite chess set was a chess set that was modeled after the story of Don Quixote de la Mancha, that errant knight who went off to joust with windmills and rescued damsels from imaginary dragons. And so obviously the king was Don Quixote, and Dulcinea, his rescued maiden, was the queen. Rocinante, his horse, was the knight, and Sancho Panzas, the bishop. But the castle was a windmill that reminded me of Don Carlos's incredibly devious and clever move against the Russian Spassky. Now maybe you've never heard of Don Carlos Repeto, and perhaps you haven't heard the story of Don Quixote and how he went out to fight windmills. But I know that the last song in the movie that was made from the story of Don Quixote is a song that's familiar to you. And the lesson I learned from my father was this. It was a lesson of hope. Because on the way home from watching Don Carlos play those games, my father offhandedly said, you know, in the 52 years that Don Carlos has continued to play, whenever he was asked how he was doing, his response was always 2 words. Estoy mejorando. I'm getting better. And what I learned from my father was this. It wasn't concentration or focus. It wasn't strategy. It was the value of hope, because there is always hope. And Don Quixote in the story, he'd been beaten, he'd been ridiculed, he was lying on his bed, he had given up. And the maiden that he had rescued and his sturdy and loyal friend, Sancho Panzas, came to him and encouraged him to continue the quest. And so he rose up off his bed to continue to fight the quest. And I know you're familiar with the song that was popularized most by Frank Sinatra, to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to go with courage into the dream that you have. And so you remember that there's always hope.